Call the meeting to the City Council Finance meeting to order, which is our first budget hearing meeting for Monday evening, June the 4th, 2018. And as you know, we are here for these next 3 nights, this evening, tomorrow evening, and Wednesday evening as well. Remember, Wednesday evening is 6 o'clock p.m. We'll have a public hearing, and then we will continue with our hearings. So this is for the budget for FY 2019. And we have quite a few people that are going to be for us this evening. Before we get started, we will start with the mayor and the chief financial officer to give us a little heads up here to what the budget's all about. But I just do want to remind everybody as well that when we get started and get through the whole process, I anticipate that you'll all stay focused on what's before us from our budget book, to discuss just what is in there, and I don't want to drift to what we did 10 years ago, and I don't want to be thinking what's going to be in 2025, because some of us may not even be here. But in any case, I want to just stay focused always as the best that we can on the budget that is before us. And as I was looking over the budget just in the last 24 hours, 48 hours, I do have to say, and as being the old timer, I guess, working with the budgets for so many years, that I have to say that just in looking in this particular one, it's very difficult where I could find an extra dime, to be truthful with you. So if some of you has found the 15 cents, then please let me know where it is, because it's very difficult to find. Yeah, there's changes because of contractual reasons, and there's other changes because of inflation. That's always happening. That's what the process is all about. But and I'm sure there's going to be questions that some people may have on a particular line item, why it may have increased because of not having an understanding. We also, over the last few days, I know there was a lot of information that was giving out to councilors because of councilors that had requests, and it was, and they were appropriate requests, but we did receive a lot of things through email, and I think all of you may and hopefully had an opportunity to see that information that was there, that was being requested. Some of which is still could still be coming to us. I don't know if it was all delivered. I have to be right up front and honest with you. I wasn't just playing around with the phone today just to see what was coming through the emails. I was busy doing things and being here as well to make sure everything was set up right. So there should be, could be some other information coming, but it's important to see it and to see where it is pertaining to maybe a department that could be coming, before us. But I don't want to just allow on how come that happened then and what we have now. So just please keep in mind that I just want to stay focused, and by doing that, I think we'll have a great couple of next few nights and having our hearings. I do want to point out that Councilor Cruz did contact me earlier, and he was away with business out of state. We was going to try to get back, so he wasn't sure if he was going to be here or not. So just with that being said, our first person to talk about the budget, because it is his budget, the mayor's budget, and he wants to make some pointers to what the next budget year is all about for all of us. So I want to introduce to you our Honorable Mayor, Bill Carpenter, to start us off. Good evening, Mr. Mayor.
Good evening, Mr. President, and good evening, councilors. Thank you for the opportunity to formally present to you the fiscal year 19 budget. At the end of last week, we sent out electronically, and I believe you have in front of you hard copies of a number of exhibits that are designed, graphs and charts, to hopefully really give you some insight into the budget in its entirety. And I'll just spend the next few minutes walking you through those with some commentary in terms of my thoughts of where we're at and where we're going. The first chart shows you general fund revenues. The fiscal year 19 general fund budget is supported by $379.8 million in revenue. Of this, the most important, at 52%, is state aid. The second largest revenue contribution, at 38%, is property tax. The remaining 10% is made up about 5% by local revenues other than property taxes, and 5% is contributed by the use of reserves and other available funds. The amount contributed by reserves comes mainly from free cash. This component is created by conservative budgeting, which generates annual surpluses. This approach has been important to establishing budget stability. The next chart shows you the cherry sheet, the state aid. And this is critical because Brockton is heavily dependent on state aid, especially for supporting its schools. Of the $197.8 million we received from the state this year, about 88%, or $172.9 million, is represented by Chapter 70 aid to the schools. 1% of the total, $2.5 million, is restricted aid, which supports school lunch and library programs and includes charter school reimbursements. Less than $23 million, or about 11%, is unrestricted. Moving on to the next graph that shows you general fund expenses, $359.7 million, 95% of all general fund revenue, is subject to the appropriation process by the City Council. If you take a look on to the next exhibit, the general fund expenses that are not appropriated, this gives you a breakdown of the 5% that does not come through the council for appropriation. $18.3 million in total represents deductions by the state from the state aid distributions. In other words, this money is taken off the top. We never see it. This includes $15.2 million in funds sent directly by the state to charter schools, as well as public schools participating in school choice that enroll Brockton students. This amount has grown dramatically over the last few years. The state also deducts $2.4 million for Brockton area transit, and the remaining amount represents charges for the county or other state services. In terms of the general fund appropriations, of the appropriated budget of $359.7 million, nearly half of the appropriated budget provides direct support to the Brockton schools and Southeastern Regional Votech High School. So if someone says about half of the total budget goes to the schools, that's just about right on the money. The second largest portion of general fund appropriations is city-side personnel salaries and overtime. That totals $68.2 million, or about 19% of the appropriated budget. And then also related to the cost of personnel or insurance and benefits, which amount to $55.3 million, or 15%. $55 million for insurance and benefits. In addition, pension costs are $24.3 million this year, or 7%. So as you add these numbers up, this means that over 40% of the appropriated budget is for costs directly related to employees and retirees. And in all, 90% of the budget is for either school support or the cost of city employees and retirees, 90%. Add in another 4% for debt service, and that just leaves the remaining 6% for ordinary maintenance and other costs. So when you look at this distribution, this shows you how difficult it is to reduce budget costs without directly affecting services. In other words, there's no way to reduce the budget in any meaningful way without laying off people. The city exists to provide services. Those services are provided by teachers, police officers, firefighters, and DPW workers. To cut the budget any further would require layoffs of those employees. The next graphic shows you general fund salaries and exactly how they're portioned out. $52.2 million, or 76% of the general fund salaries, are directed toward public safety. $3.3 million, or 5%, is directed towards DPW workers who are not paid out of enterprise funds. And the remaining balance of $12.6 million, or 19%, is for all other city workers. In the next couple of exhibits, we want to show you some 5-year trends in both revenues and appropriations. So you look at this next chart of general fund revenue trends. This exhibit displays the changes in the 4 main sources of general fund revenues over the past 5 fiscal years. State aid has grown only 6.7% over 5 years. That works out to less than 1.5% per year, which is less than the rate of inflation. The local receipts category has actually declined because the enterprise funds are not reimbursing the general fund for the health, pension, and other costs of their employees. As a result, more than half of the general fund revenue base has been essentially flat for 5 years. Some relief has been provided by the property tax. The city has also needed to apply its reserves to support spending on municipal services. The next chart gives you the 5-year trends in general fund appropriations, where we're spending the money. This exhibit is showing the changes in basic appropriation categories over the same 5-year period. These changes are governed by that flat trend in revenues. Note that we have some costs that are essentially fixed in nature. Funding the pension system has required steady increases in appropriations, with a large spike of nearly $5 million last year and an additional increase of another $1 million this year. And where you can find that, I'll direct your attention in the blocks below the graph, third category down, pensions, slide across the right. If you look at 2017, 2018, and 2019, you see the pension costs going from 18.6 to 23.3 to $24.3 million. This trend will continue for at least another decade as we eliminate the unfunded liability to the pension system. Since 2015, we have seen pension costs increase by over 1/3, from $18 million in 2015 to over $24 million this year. We have a statutory obligation to make these payments. We've had good success in limiting growth in health costs to less than the market rate of inflation through bargaining with our unions. We've done a good job in managing the amount of revenue we dedicate to debt, and we've increased our capital spending and rebuilt reserves. Our salary costs have grown by about $14 million in this period. In part, this reflects catch-up for earlier years of low inflation, as well as some staff additions. Although our direct appropriation to schools has declined, the reason for it is the $15 million deduction off the top for charter school tuitions. In fact, this year, our contribution to the schools exceeds our legal requirement by $2.7 million. Now, I'd like to spend a few minutes with you on my priorities for this FY19 budget. First and foremost, I wanted to direct as much assistance as I could to our schools. The city is being badly hurt by how the state is currently funding our schools. The legislature's own commission indicated that the Chapter 70 formula does not adequately address the cost of inflation, the cost of special education students, low-income students, or English language learners. And I think if you take a minute to look at this next bar graph, this really gives you the whole story in terms of net school aid versus the enrollment of our schools. The red line represents net school aid. In other words, the Chapter 70, after the charter school tuitions are taken off the top, this is the amount we actually received. And while you've seen that number actually trending down for the past 3 years, our enrollments are up over the same period. Less money coming into the system while more students are coming into the system, and costs continue to rise. It's an impossible combination to maintain, not sustainable. The methodology for funding the charter schools deducts the city's average cost per student from our Chapter 70 funds and sends that directly to the charter schools that those students attend. It's a flawed methodology because the school system's cost cannot be reduced at the same rate at which students depart. Many of our costs are fixed per school building. The problem is the students leaving are not all leaving from one building. They're sprinkled across the city, and that means that adjusting staffing to account for the loss of a few students per class is very difficult. And the next chart here shows you how dramatically the charter school deductions, the money being taken away from us off the top, has spiked up in the last few years. $5 million in 2016 we lost, $6 million in 2017, and in the last 2 years that deduction has gone from $6 million 2 years ago to $15 million this year. That 2-year period also reflects when the New Heights Charter School opened for business here in the city. To make matters worse, the state fails to fully fund its own method to assist communities with the impact of charter schools. When the charter school was brought in, the state made a promise to reimburse some of those charter school tuitions to the local school district, to the city of Brockton. 100% reimbursement in the first year, and then 25% a year for the next 4 years. That's the promise that's made by the state. However, the state does not fully fund these latter years, sometimes not at all. In fact, the past 2 years, the state has paid us zero for the 25% per year for years 2 and 3, 4, 5 of charter students. They have not paid us anything of the promised 25% per year reimbursement. This year alone, just this year, that failure to pay the 25% has cost us over $2 million in funding to the schools. And this loss of revenue is on top of the millions per year lost due to the changes in how the state calculates low-income students. A year ago, the state changed the formula from low-income students to economically disadvantaged, and somehow we took a big hit, although I'm sure that those families' financial circumstances haven't changed. We have just as many kids that are being raised in low-income households, but we're not being properly reimbursed for them anymore either. Our next chart gives you an idea of how the city has tried, to the extent that we can, to bridge the gap between the shortfall in state funding for the schools to help the schools survive. These are the cumulative dollars over required school spending each year. And as you saw in that previous chart, where over the last 3 years, our net school aid has gone down dramatically. Simultaneously, the city's local contribution to schools has gone up, trying to bridge some of that gap. From fiscal 2014 through this fiscal year, we'll have now given our schools nearly $10 million above and beyond the legal requirement. As you go on to the next exhibit, this is designed to illustrate for you how much of our overall budget is unavoidable and committed that we have no discretion with. So if you look at this exhibit, this depicts how the city's fixed cost and its own obligations under the Education Reform Act consume so much of the revenue base. Unavoidable costs include pensions, health insurance, debt service, tuition for Southeastern Regional Vocational High School, and other state charges. So the top line is the city's revenue, the bottom blue line is unavoidable costs, but then when you come up to the green line, that's the unavoidable costs plus our mandated share of the school budget. Out of $185 million of revenue this year, 143 is already allocated to unavoidable costs that we have no discretion on. This makes it difficult to compensate with city funds for the state's failure to fund our schools properly. And as I mentioned earlier, for the most part, the city has exceeded its obligation. And again, in this current budget that's in front of you, we will exceed our obligation by $2.7 million to the schools, FY19. My other primary objective in the FY19 budget was to increase staffing in the police department and maintain it in the fire department. And those next two exhibits break down for you retirements, filling of vacancies, promotions. In summary, for the police, my budget funds the Public Information Community Outreach Officer. It also funds the addition of 3 new sergeants and 1 new lieutenant above the present ordinance. These positions are funded starting in September by promotion. The budget also funds the filling of the 4 vacancies caused by these promotions, as well as the 9 vacancies caused by retirements. These 13 new cadets will start into the academy in February of 2019. You've got a similar breakdown here for the fire department. The fire budget funds the 9 anticipated retirements for the full year, and in addition, it funds 1 new firefighter who was unable to join last year due to military service. So we actually do have a net increase of 1 on firefighters. The final set of exhibits there shows the positions which were unfilled at budget time. To save money, some of these are not budgeted for the full year. We intend to fill the positions, but not for the full year in order to save money to balance the budget. I should mention that the budget seeks to increase capacity in the law department. 2 part-time assistant city solicitor positions are funded. 1 was filled in March, the 2nd is under active recruitment. These were funded in part by reductions to the outside counsel budget. The funding for the school equity lawsuit was maintained, and the funding for a hearing officer for Chapter 40U disputes was added. There will be additional budget commentary provided by the CFO during his presentation on Wednesday night. He will focus on what steps were taken to fund the budgets. He will also provide some context in comparing the city to certain other municipalities. So, councilors, I thank you for the opportunity to provide you with my overview of the entire FY19 budget. Over the next several evenings, you'll have the opportunity to review each individual department's budget with its department head. And at that, Mr. President, with your permission, I'll make myself available for questions specific to the mayor's budget.
Very good. We'll start that in a few moments. Mr. Conda, did you have anything you wanted to say at this particular time?
I think I can take care of it Wednesday. I think we have a long agenda tonight.
Okay, very good. That's good. Councilors, with that being said, and after hearing the mayor make his comments in regards to the budget, then I would think that we'd be ready to proceed with the agenda that we have in front of us. The agenda has not changed at all from what we emailed and gave you last week, so at this point, we might as well start with the first order of business. So, Madam Clerk, the first item we have.
Council, is just a very brief summary of the mayor's budget. The payroll is level funded, except for $12,000 for 2 college student interns. Otherwise, the payroll is level funded at the same level as last year's appropriation. We have made cuts in the other part of the budget, so overall, the mayor's office budget is reduced by about $100,000.
Councilors, any questions for the mayor? Councilor Sullivan.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for that summary. I truly appreciate it. Just to talk about those 2 college interns, just so I can get some clarity on that. So it's a total of 18 grand, and so it's 2 of them. So it's factors at 9,000 each.
Let me correct myself. It's actually a total of 3. 1 I had built into the budget originally, and then we added 2 more after meeting with Bridgewater State University.
So these are current college students?
Graduate students.
Current grad students, or they did graduate?
No. Well, in other words, these are students who have their bachelor's degree.
And they're getting a
in
master's
grad
degree.
school. Correct.
So
I'll be happy to give you the model real quick if you'd like, because this is different than in the past. So what we've looked to do, if you look at the list of all the positions in my budget, the bottom one, number of 11, we've established a part-time Main Street and intern coordinator. So the intent of this position is to be able to have someone part-time oversee the 3 college interns that we'd be using during the year. Those interns would be implementing the Main Streets program. So in the past, we had 1 salaried person under the B21 that was our Main Street manager. We were forced to eliminate that position in a budget cut because that was funded by CDBG funds, and HUD stopped the funding of the CDBG funds, so it forced us to not be able to fill that position a year ago. What we're looking to do here is bring back that critical Main Streets program to help our business districts, but do it at a fraction of the cost by using a combination of one part-time person to oversee and 3 college interns to implement the Main Streets program. The intention would be to have 1 in Montello, 1 in Campello, and 1 citywide.
See,
So-
I think that makes sense. I guess
Okay.
from my confusion is, I mean, I have an undergrad and a grad degree, and when I interned, I didn't get paid. I got college credit. So I guess my question is this a unique situation where these people, these 3 students are going to have an expertise that should compensate them as opposed to getting credit at Bridgewater State?
Right, so I think part of the difference is that the compensated internships are more common with grad students than with undergrad, because clearly they have a little higher level of expertise now.
I never found that.
Yeah.
I'm looking in the wrong place.
Well, I don't know how you did things at Boston College,
Yeah.
Counselor, but yeah. But the idea is for us to be able to provide some part-time stipend. We cannot guarantee, but we've expressed a strong request with Bridgewater State for Brockton students to fill these positions.
Okay.
So our goal here is to help some Brockton students with a little bit of part-time work study, but at the same token, really benefit the city at the same time by getting good work done cheap and supervised by 1 part-time person that would oversee the program.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. The last question is, I mean, it is what it is in terms of the budget. I mean, I don't have a lot of questions. I did have one question, which was a 0 request and a 0 recommendation. And maybe, Jay, if the mayor doesn't know this, it's the last line item on the first page under Mayor's Goods and Services. I interpreted it to be Historical Commission, but I don't know if that's the correct. It's 91210076, HISTRL.com. It's been 0 since you've been mayor, and I just wanted to know if I'm interpreting that correctly. Historical Commission, that is what it is? Because as I recall, and I believe this was through you, Councilor Beauregard, Councilor, didn't we just adopt under the ordinance, and I'm the chair of the ordinance, we adopted the ratification of Historic Commission in the city of Brockton, correct? Yeah, but we just enacted it this year. Prior to? Okay.
I've got the line.
So I'll just respectfully ask, Mr. Mayor, I mean, you can't ratify it now, but in terms of going forward,
We'll
and
work with
you'll
you
still
on
be mayor next year, if you could consider that, because it's
We will
on the
absolutely
docket.
work with you on that,
Okay.
Counselor.
Thank you, Mr.
I
Mayor.
think that the CFO hit it, that this budget was done
Prior
before
to
the ordinance
final
was
enactment.
ratified. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Counselor. Thank you. Anyone else? Seeing none? You're lucky, Mr. Mayor.
Still haven't beaten the city clerk's record.
Thank you. Next item, Madam Clerk.
Southeast Regional School, Louise Gomez,
Good evening, how are you?
Good evening, councilors.
Very good.
I know you have a lengthy agenda, so I'll try to be somewhat brief and summarize Southeastern's budget
Very
for
good.
FY19. Overall, as you know, we serve 9 communities. 65% of our student body comes from the city of Brockton. Our overall budget is up 3%. For Brockton, the assessment is up $187,159. Which is approximately a 4.8% increase. We continue to operate at net school spending, meaning that we operate at at the Chapter 70 foundation budget level. We do not ask the communities for anything in addition. That's something that both Mark Lindy and Tony Branch, who are here tonight, represent the city of Brockton on Southeastern School Committee, are adamant that that we basically try to keep the books in our budget in par with what with the minimum, so that we're not overburdening the communities which Brockton is responsible for 65% of that, so we try to be sensitive to that.
Very good. Any questions for the superintendent? Counselor Sullivan?
Question. I just thank you for being here. Good evening, Mr. Superintendent. I just want to say how proud I was to attend Southeastern when Governor Baker showed up that day. I know Mr. Lindy and Mr. Branch were there, and they could have gone to any regional school in the Commonwealth, and they chose Southeastern. So kudos to you and your staff. More importantly, the kids were so impressive that day. So keep doing what you're doing, and please pass on my best wishes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Superintendent.
Thank you.
Mr. President.
Thank you, Counselor. And I do want to thank the two school committee members for joining us this evening. Appreciate it very much. Counselor Beauregard.
Mr. Chair, again, I want to commend you also. It's very impressive to see the remarkable accomplishments of the student. Congratulations on 50 years. I mean, when I see your budget and what you do with it, I realize we're one of the many, quote, contributors to this. But since we are the largest portion and the students come out doing remarkable things, and you've been recognized for so many accomplishments, both for your students and for your academic and how would I say it, resourceful, new and progressive programming. So congratulations. May you have a safe summer.
Thank you, Councilor.
Thank you, Counselor. Anyone else? Seeing as none, thank you. Appreciate it as always.
Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Clerk?
Council on Aging, Janet Fitzgerald, Director.
Good evening, Ms. Fitzgerald. How are you?
Good evening, Counselor. How are you?
Good to see you. Pleasure.
Good. So I just want to just say a couple things. We had a great year. We've been extremely busy. I want to say thank you to my staff and volunteers. We continue to grow. We presently have roughly 6,000 active members in our system. That's 6,000 out of the 15,883 elders in Brockton. And I know this is not the time nor the place to talk about this, but I would like to have an opportunity to come back before you at a later time to talk about the desperate need for staffing and the desperate need for some help to expand our center or move or something. We've kind of hit some roadblocks, and it's kind of becoming evident to me that none of us are really equipped or knowledgeable enough to, keep moving forward with the plans to expand. So that's it. Thank you.
You're welcome back anytime. You know that, and you know we're here to work with you, so we don't have to express that any further. But, councilors? Lucky. No, did I hear something? Oh, I'm sorry, Councilor Nacastro.
Thank you.
I still don't see that
Chairman.
side right.
I know you don't. Good evening, Ms. Fitzgerald. Thank you for coming. I just wanted to ask, and probably everyone knows this, but I'm the new guy. You have a notation here, staff paid by EOEA formula grant. Just tell me, give me a thumbnail on that.
Sure. So every year we apply for funds from the formula grant. The formula is based on a dollar figure times the number of elders 60 and older in the city based on the 2010 census. So back in 2010, the census figure was 15,883. Presently, we are getting $9 per elder. Because we all know that our elders are living longer, and that's a great thing, and they're living in Brockton, that's even a better thing. The number is growing, but we're not being compensated because we're not getting the true dollar figure for the number of elders 60 and older in the community. So what we are looking at for FY19, there's Mass Council on Aging. We're all working to fight to increase this dollar figure until our 2020 census comes back out with the correct figure. So we're hoping for FY19 we're going to be bumped up to $11 per elder. Gives a little extra cash to actually bring in probably a part-time staff person. So that's pretty much what the formula grant is about.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Beauregard?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for coming out this evening. We know how hard your people work, and you're saying you want extra staffing in what capacity?
So we've been saying for a couple years, especially I make it a point to let you all know that we are not the bingo party place. And I'm hoping it's sticking because I've said it hundreds and hundreds of times. We have really become a social service agency. The needs in the community for our seniors are great. Unbelievably imaginable. You can't imagine the requests that we have on a daily basis. We're getting a lot of homeless elders coming in looking for places to live. The need for food, health insurance, medications, I mean, the list goes on and on. So, yeah, we provide social and recreational. That's about this much of what we do in the course of a day. It's the outreach and the services that we provide is really taking a toll on us. I have Dottie Slack, which you all know, and myself. We're the only ones that are providing the outreach, and it's just getting a little overwhelming.
Can I ask you on that, where you said you're dealing with the mass cultural seniors? Does that mean that you are, how would I say it, lobbying on the Hill?
Yep.
Okay. So you're waiting for this state budget to see if you're going to get any more funding?
Correct.
I am also, if it's all right, there are, with every profession, how would I say it, a professional organization that you can belong to and attend different, I'm going to call them conferences or what have you, to get some exchange of ideas and learning and training. Do you ever run across anyone that's coming up with different ideas that we might be able to use here?
So we do get invited to a Council on Aging conference every year. So that is an opportunity. But you know what? We're kind of all in the same boat. We're all struggling. Funding is just not there. Surprisingly, the smaller towns have like 10 to 15 staff, these small little towns, but yet they only have about 2,000 elders in the town. So something's wrong with this picture, you know, but the smaller towns do a lot better than us. Do we go to conferences to kind of share ideas? We do.
Okay, I was just curious, you know, if they come up with different ideas, you know, you as speakers and what have you in that area. I was just curious about that. So basically you're telling me Boston, New Bedford, Lynn, they would have the same problem as yourself?
Yes.
Okay. All right, thank you. Not okay that you have the problem, but so I understand that that's why you're mobilizing to work together to get more funding. Well, thank you, because you guys do an amazing job, and I'm well aware of how much you do with social services. And sometimes it bums me out because people don't realize you exist, and I don't understand that part. But that's because you're certainly out there doing a whole lot, and we'll see you next week at the rally.
Great,
yes,
thank you very
Thursday,
much.
June 14th. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Any other counselors? Did I omit anybody? I guess we're all set.
Thank
you. Appreciate it. Madam Clerk, next item. Good evening, Chief. How are you?
Good, thank you.
Anything you'd like to say before,
I'd just like to take an opportunity to thank the hardworking men and women of the Brockton Police Department for their dedicated service every day of the week. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Thank you, Chief. Questions for the chief on his budget? Counsel Fowle.
Good evening, Chief.
Good evening.
Chief, just a couple of preliminary comments to you and my colleagues about the police budget. And let me preface all remarks by saying I agree. I think we have the best staff. I think they're great in what they do. I will tell you that I'm concerned that there needs to be a greater level of visibility and accountability, and I'll get into some statistics in a minute about that. I also want to mention to you that and again, it's contractual, so there's nothing we can do about it, but $680,319 for severance costs for 9 officers. I mean, I got to tell you, that's a staggering amount. You know, if that isn't addressed in future collective bargaining agreements, I can easily see that figure going to $1 million, depending upon how many people are retiring, and that just really jumped out at me. The second thing I would say is this is a tight budget. I half expected to see the mayor come in and ask for another $1 million in overtime, and I don't think the revenues are there. The next thing I would say is that, budgets aren't a mathematical exercise. They're actually a policy statement, as well as an investment that I think residents make in a department, and they're looking for something back in return for that investment. And so I'm going to get into some of the issues that I think many of us are called about. One of them is code enforcement. And I'm not happy with the attitude about code enforcement, and I'm going to tell you why. Back in late February or March, we received a packet of information about some businesses that were out of compliance as far as code enforcement was concerned. And the clerk called me and he said, "Are you aware you got this packet?" And I said, "No, I'm not." I said, "What do you usually do with it?" He said, "Well, we usually send it to the ward counselor so he or she can go out and can investigate and perhaps familiarize himself or herself with the issues." So they all happened to be in Councilor Nicastro's ward. Welcome aboard, new counselor. So she took the time to go out with the clerk and visit those 4 businesses to become familiar with their location, the issues that are being presented, the challenges of trying to bring them into compliance. And at the end of that, she sent an email to an officer saying, "Would you please go back and revisit these again?" Because she wanted, and she discussed it with me, she wanted the most relevant and the nearest possible observations to that particular date. Well, what does she get back in return? She gets back an email about, Councilor Fairwell. I mean, even being on the department and being a mayor, still can't, I guess, get your name right. And the email said, in the other 2 cases, 2 of which she mentioned, we have been working with these establishments for over a year to come into compliance. We do not visit a place and write them up to be brought before the council after 1 visit. It is after many visits and countless explanations on what needs to be done. When you receive a letter from me, it's because they have already had their last chance. By you and Mr. Zioli visiting these places and giving another quote-unquote last chance, it undermines our ability to enforce violations. And then this person went on to say, I've been trying to get this particular business to comply for over a year, and when we have visited his shop no less than 10 times over this period, my last visit resulted in me being called an effing racist. I feel at this point we have done our job and it is time for the council to take action. Now, I've worn a uniform and I've dealt with nice people, I've dealt with not so nice people. I've dealt with people like the one who was described in this email. What does it take for the police to say, we've been there once or twice, 3rd strike you're out, we're going to summon you into court to a show cause hearing for a code violation? Because if a resident complained about this and they went a year, while we repeatedly went back and back and back, and I guess held the person's hand, to me that's unacceptable. Now maybe it is acceptable to some of my colleagues or all of the rest of them, but it isn't to me. I mean, at some point, John, you've got to take the bull by the horns and say, this person is not going to cooperate. We need to summons them into court. So I guess what I would like to ask you publicly is, given the resources you're going to receive for fiscal year 2019, will you and the mayor and anyone else, the command staff, please put a priority on code enforcement activities? I don't care if you have to reform the team that works on it. I don't care if you have to set specific time limits for these issues to be resolved, but it really will make the city look very much better. It will certainly eliminate a lot of phone calls that we get and the frustration level from the public. And that leads me into, well, let me ask you that question. Will you at least commit that you will go back and meet with the appropriate people and let's tighten up in this? I mean, spending a year going to the same address is nuts.
No, that doesn't work. And I'm in agreement. We need to get on the proper path and take care of this problem.
All right, now the second thing that I have a problem with is a gentleman put in a complaint through C-Click-Fix. That's touted quite a bit, that it's a good idea and people can access it. He complained because he put in about illegally parked cars or unregistered cars, creating a nuisance or an unsafe condition at a business location. It went to the police department, and the police department didn't take action. They sent it to the mayor's office. So I guess my next question is, and I have a copy of the C-Click Fix disposition, are your people allowed on their own to go out and investigate and take action, or does everything have to be cleared through this quality of life committee that the mayor has?
No, the C-Click Fix, when we get a complaint, it goes to division that would take care of it. If it's traffic, it would go to the traffic commission. If it's shift level parking, it would go to the shift. Sergeant Sleeman handles a lot of it for the Board of Health, and the goal is to get it to where it needs to go.
Well, then maybe that was an anomaly. Let's see how things go in future months, because I know that if we were to wait for the mayor, his schedule could be busy. He might have to postpone one of those quality of life meetings, and so a resident might put a complaint in on a Friday after they've had their Thursday meetings, and then wait an entire week or maybe 2 weeks for something to be done, and that drives the frustration level of the public. And now I want to go on to, I think my last comment for tonight is traffic enforcement. We've had a lot of high-profile accidents, fatalities, cars flying through the air, overturning, hitting buildings, pinning a woman against the building downtown at Center and Main. And in my opinion, we're going in the wrong direction for traffic enforcement, because in 2016, there were 6,251 citations issued, and then in 2000, I don't have 2017, but then we fall into 69, 65, and the number of speeding violations is down. This is data that, thank you for providing it through Captain Porcaro. I just think we need an enhanced traffic enforcement program. Now, you might say to me, we don't have time. We've got too many calls. When I was on the road and I stopped a vehicle, if I had to leave, if the dispatcher said, leave that vehicle, we've got an emergency, you write down the person's name and their license number, and then you mail them a citation later. Now you can just take out your phone and, I suppose, take a picture of the license and registration. But I really believe we've got to step up traffic enforcement. So again, given the resources you're going to receive for fiscal year 2019, will you publicly tell us tonight that you'll get together with the appropriate people, and not just the 4 officers who might be assigned to the Traffic Commission, but, let's have some high visibility areas with some traffic enforcement. Is that acceptable to you?
It is. We're currently, just last week, Captain Porcaro sent out a directive each shift, staffing levels permitted, to have a car solely assigned to traffic. We're working with the crime analysts to find out high priority areas where there's a lot of citations, a lot of moving violations, a lot of accidents, so we can do more targeted enforcement.
Okay, and the last thing this is just a technical question. Every year we have $244,000 for, I think it's called the Mayor's Safety Initiative. I don't understand the public comments, and he's gone, or I would say this to him personally. I don't understand the comments that if you want walking beats and you want bicycle patrols, then don't cut our overtime. When I was on the department, we had a Route 1 officer in Campello. We had a Route 4 officer, Leo Smith, downtown. On weekends, we had somebody up in the village in Route 8. I don't understand why these things have to be in overtime. Is there not a way to take the staff that you currently have and configure it in a way that even if you put someone downtown with a cruiser and tell them, look, we may have to pull you for an emergency call, but you're going to be downtown as much as possible to provide that area with some coverage. So does it have to be in overtime? Can you not configure things so that we can get some walking beats and bicycle patrols as part of regular patrol?
We're trying to move that way, and once staffing level permits it, we'll be able to. We have a 404A car that's out every day downtown to get out and walk if they can, but sometimes it all depends on the call volume. But I agree with you.
Well, I'm going to say to you what I said last year. I happen to know you as a great person, not just as the police chief. I wish you were the type that would snap and growl every once in a while and hold people a little more accountable, and if you have to, tell the mayor, hey, I got a contract. I'll run the police department, you run the mayor's office. You tell me the policies you want enforced and I'll do it, but I'm going to decide on the personnel and how we do it and who's assigned to what shift, because I really think you've got the potential with the resources that you'll be given and with the officers who work at the police department. I think those men and women will come through for you. But I do think they have to be molded into a very proactive, cohesive, supportive unit for each other and for all of the residents. And I appreciate, Mr. Chairman, you giving me this much time, and I appreciate your efforts, Chief.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Sullivan?
Thank you. Good evening, Chief. How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
I was just sitting here thinking, John, 13 years ago I got elected, and 13 years ago you and I were working a lot together on the Traffic Commission. Time flies, sure does, went by quick. I don't have a lot of questions relative to the budget. I just needed a couple of clarifications. A question I ask every year, and I asked it to Manny Gomes as well, and to when Bill was here as well, vehicles. Vehicles is a #1 asset, I think, and we need to upgrade them as much. It looks like you wanted 200,000.
Yes.
The mayor's giving you 150.
Yes.
Could you just clarify for us, how many vehicles will that purchase for the department?
We're hoping 3.
3 new ones?
Yes.
And would they be the SUV kind?
Yes.
Okay, great, great. So is that a net gain, or do you take 3 off the road?
No, it's a gain. We're trying to do this every year. Before, we used to do a one-time supplement and try to buy 7 or 8 at once.
Yep.
The past few years, we've tried buying 3 or 4 a year to keep the fleet going.
Okay, good, that's good to hear. I also, and it's a minuscule dollar amount, but I think I asked you this last year, it's $1,000 you're looking for out-of-state travel. Is that when you go to, like, police chief conferences in DC? What is
It would
that?
be if someone attended a conference.
You as the chief, or anybody?
Yeah, me as the chief, or if we send somebody.
Okay. And the last one, and I'm not picking on the police department, I ask this to every department that I see this. Petty cash, it's a short dollar amount, it's under $1,500, but in this day and age, I mean, what is petty cash used for? Because it's not really a good thing to have necessarily.
Pay tolls if officers go, leave Brockton and they get a bill for a toll, it pays that. It pays parking if they have court out of town. They submit a receipt, the receipt is copied, and then it's submitted for reimbursement.
Reimbursement from the city?
Yes.
Out of that petty cash?
Yes.
Is that right, Jay? Okay. They could, yeah. Okay. Thank you, Chief. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Rodriguez?
Thank you, Mr. You, the President or the Chair?
Whatever you want to call me, Jay, yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I've been called a lot of things, so it doesn't matter.
Well, it's good. I just needed to get that clarified. Chief, I just have a quick question, and I was looking at the budget, and you see some heavy-duty items on the line item on the budget itself, and I did some digging in looking at a community that we tend to, anytime somebody is talking about another comparable city to Brockton, it's always brought up, which is Lowell. But yet, when you look at it, I don't quite understand why a city that has basically the same size of a police force as we do, you look in their budget last year, they spent $430,000 on holiday pay. And then you come down here to Brockton's, it's over $700 and something thousand, going up to $900,000. You look at longevity pay, they're spending $10,000 on it, basically. When you look at hours, it's almost $200,000. You look at, they don't even have a line item for firearms, and it seems that we are spending around $1.4 million in firearms. How does that work? I know a lot of these things are negotiated in contracts and things like that, but how does Lowell get away with that and Brockton can't get away with it?
Brockton has a different union, a collective bargaining agreement gives these officers those benefits. Lowell doesn't.
But the interesting thing is, they also have a lot, quite a few more officers than we do.
Yes.
And this is the reason why, because they're able to spend their funds elsewhere in terms of hiring new police officers. And I brought this up during the one of the when we were talking about the contract, the supervisor's contract, is I don't think we can continue to do this as a city. I mean, this is basically a clear definition of doing the same exact thing, expecting different results. You look at, they're spending, again, going to Lowell, their budget last year was about $25 million. $24 million was basically put into personnel. So very few dollars in terms of all these added costs to the budget. And that's why they have the number of personnel that they have and we don't. Because I think it's something that we need to look into seriously when we're negotiating these contracts, because we can't keep doing this. It's gonna get to a point where this city is gonna be in a situation that it's not even what we went through back in the 90s. I mean, this is gonna be a lot worse than that, because the costs keep going up in terms of benefits and pensions and all that other stuff. But yet some of these things that we're negotiating, it seems like we are our worst enemy in terms of putting things in contracts that we know for a fact that it's going to bankrupt the city. So I hope that, that we can use some of the examples that we see going on in other communities that are very successful. I mean, you look at New Bedford, for instance, they have 100 more police officers than we do, with the budget that's pretty much the same size, but some of these things we got to look at it and say, listen, I have, as you can tell by the fact that I came out as a city councilor and put in an order to increase the number of police sergeants, because I feel that we don't have enough police supervisors, patrolling supervisors in the streets of Brockton. And it also comes back to show you that we are a friend of the police department and we support the police department. But the issue that we're running into is the fact that we don't have enough boots on the ground, and yet we're spending a lot more than some of these other communities are. And those two things are in direct conflict with each other. And it's going to get to a point where we're going to have a real sit-down, a real conversation to, this rubber stamping contracts just isn't going to cut it anymore. We're going to have to do something about this, because it's got to stop somewhere, because we cannot continue to do this at this particular level, because we're not doing much, even for the men and women in uniform. I have conversations with them on a regular basis. They're being forced to work hours that they don't want to work. They're being taken away from their families in some instances because we don't have enough soldiers on the ground to do the job. And I think we as a department, we as a city, we need to seriously sit down and have a frank conversation as to how we're going to handle these things going forward. Thank you. Thank you,
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Beauregard.
Mr. President, thank you, Chief, for being here. I want to get back to what all my colleagues have said so far, and I'm really big on seeing a lot more police or activity, feet or bike or, little motorcycles that go around on in the downtown area. Because Officer Crowley will tell you when he goes to the Downtown Brockton Association meetings 10 months a year, that they say over and over again, the businesses, the nonprofits, the groups of people that come downtown, they want to see that activity. They want to see people going downtown, walking around, and there's just something about seeing somebody in a blue uniform, whether it's on a bike or walking around, that leaves people to believe that they're safer. Now, generally, I imagine that they are. Of course, I want to add a stipulation to this. I like the idea because, unfortunately, we have, how would I say it, a service downtown that does not always invite the best of characters. And they don't, how would I say it, make it pleasing for many of the businesses and those that wish to, support them, or the people that work downtown. Many people say, I want to leave us, downtown. I think it's safe. I walk around. But the thing is, it's perception, perception, perception. And I'm not, saying that they have to stand around and look like some kind of third world nation, God forbid, where they're standing there with all their rifles and whatever, but just walking around, getting an idea of so-and-so that's the questionable character, and as soon as they see him, addressing the issue, or whether it's just, going through parking lots and whatever. To me, I would imagine that the crime analyst would say, I was very impressed with her when I met her, being downtown and running a nonprofit down there, that they noticed and they say that there is a difference. And just to me, it just believes that maybe things need to be shifted around a little bit, because maybe if they were around more, there would be, quote, certainly the less perception of crime, but maybe less crime to begin with. The other thing is please clear this up for me, because there is more misinformation in this city than humanly imaginable. But is it true that if a police officer is walking or on a bike or on a motorcycle and they see a very violent crime transpiring, that they can't do anything because they need a cruiser to do it? I mean, what happens in this case?
They would use their radio, get off, and they would engage that suspect and do whatever police duty needed to be done.
All right, thank you, because that is some misinformation that's going around. And years ago, there used to be a program called Weed and Seed, and it was just terrific. And through Brockton Neighbors United and whatever, and there was a tremendous amount of more interaction with people in blue coming out to the community. And I mean, that particular program doesn't exist in the same capacity anymore. But to me, that makes all the difference. And I want to commend the people that do a great job and come out, and they're very good to me. And of course, you mentioned Sergeant Schliemann before, and he's really had to put up with a lot. And since I'm a regular at the License Commission, Lieutenant Legreese has just been really, really good with a lot of our nightclub problems. So anyway, I want to thank you for that. But that is something I wanted to mention, and I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. I gave you a little bit of leadway, because it wasn't all pertaining to the budget, so stay on the budget, please. Anything, Councilor Cruz?
Thank you. Good evening, Chief. Good evening. A couple of quick questions. I see here police capital outlay, $150,000. What is that used for? What is that? Vehicles.
Okay, because we also have vehicles under police,
That's for maintenance.
on the last page, so it's in here twice, okay. No, that's the maintenance, okay. Police capital outlay, the 150 is, because I see it in here two different places. What Councilor Sullivan was asking you was under police.
The last page is the summary.
Okay, thank you. And under that also, there is purchase of services, around $1,061,000. What purchase of services generally is that? It's also in the summary I'm looking at.
Okay. Steve, do you have that?
I'm not sure the question.
Personal services?
Purchase of services.
All of that stuff, Chief.
Oh, okay, I'm looking at the summary twice. Okay, I apologize, I'm looking at the summary twice.
Oh. Microfilm,
That's just a summary of all of those, okay.
That's the summary page.
Of the goods and supplies, all right, thank you. I didn't get a chance to review that earlier, so thank you. And then just, the only thing I have, a quick statement. It's wonderful that everybody wants some more walking beats downtown, but I appreciate the fact that there are people that live in Ward 1 and Ward 7 and Ward 3 on the outskirts of the city who need to see plenty of police presence. And so as much as it may be politically sound nice to have more walking beats, and they're important, walking beats on 123 and Belmont Street and more cruisers out in our neighborhoods are important too. So
Absolutely.
Thank you for keeping it that way, particularly traffic enforcement. So thank you. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you, Councilor. Anyone, Councilor Nacastro?
Mr. Chairman, good evening, Chief Crowley.
evening.
Thanks for recently meeting with me, and I know that you're trying to help me with my various Ward 4 issues as they arise. Speaking about police presence and also reflecting on the mayor's comments this evening about adding 4 more officers that would be promoted from the patrolmen, my constituents repeatedly have told me that they believe we need more patrolmen, and I do too. And so I would like to suggest that you delay those promotions until February, when the new patrolmen come out of school and come back onto the force, so that we have a steady amount of patrolmen. And I'd also like to urge you to add more patrolmen as soon as possible. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Darrencourt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Seems like this mic is not on. It's on now. Thank you, Chief Crowley. I would like to thank you personally for taking the time to meet with me a couple months ago regarding some of the issues that I have. But I see that you requested $200,000. They may give you $150,000. Do you know why he cut that other $50,000?
It was a decision made at the mayor's office.
I'm sorry?
It was a decision made at the mayor's office.
So you don't really know? Okay, that's good. One of the things that I know you guys have been doing is that you are all over the city, and one of the things that I would like to request is that, to see more police presence on Pole Street and also it's West Chestnut. I know that people are speeding a lot over there, although sometimes I do see some cruisers, especially probably like after like 7 o'clock, 7 p.m. So if you can put some guys up there to kind of like chase some of these people who are speeding crazily up there. And I would like to commend you, for your leadership as the chief, and also all your men and women who are doing a wonderful job out there, because I know it's not easy.
Thank you.
But there's always room for improvement, and I would hope that you guys will continue do the due diligence for the resident of Brockton. Although my colleague from Ward 1 just talked about the necessity of having patrolmen all over the city. As a council at large, I would like all the city of Brockton to see that presence, not just one ward or another. So thank you for your service, and I yield my time, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilor. Any other councilors for the chief? As always, Chief, thank you, and we thank you for the department and the great men and women and what they're doing and keeping us safe every day, as they're doing right now while we're here. So we appreciate it, and I know you're working hard to make sure that we got enough protection out there to cover the whole entire city. So appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Madam Clerk.
Mr. President, we received a call at about 6 o'clock this evening that Mr. Zaff was having a family medical emergency and would not be able to be here. We have subsequently followed that up with an email from him, so we'll forward that on to you.
Okay. Councilor Sullivan.
I'm going to make a motion to postpone this. As you recall, when I was president last year, Mr. Zaff and Mr. Wheeler did not appear before us. They had their proxy, Mr. Mayor, and at that time I said, next year's budget, they must appear. So in light of what we were just told, and he has a family emergency, I can appreciate that, but I'm going to make a motion to postpone this matter.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. We're going to postpone this particular item. Any particular time at the end of the hearings?
Chair, you're the chairman, whatever you want, but it won't be tonight.
No, it won't be tonight, so we'll hold it until Wednesday. How's that?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Motion been made and seconded. All in favor? Opposed? We'll do that on Wednesday night. Madam Clerk, you can add that to the list for Wednesday, okay? Thank you. Next item.
President, Chairman Wheeler wasn't able to make it tonight, so I'm here in his place.
Mr. President.
Councilor Sullivan.
Again, and I respect Mr. Pina. I've known him for over 30 years, and I served on that board. But unfortunately, Mr. Pina, I wish he was the chair. He's not the chair. And I am going to make a motion to postpone, even though Craig would be learned enough to tell us an update. Again, as I stated last year, if you're a chairman, you should at least appear one night before the city council. And again, out of respect of the planning board and those that serve, including Mr. Pina, I am going to make a motion to postpone at the will of the council for the chairman to appear.
Motion's been made and seconded that we're going to postpone this item as well. It'll go to Wednesday. All in favor? Opposed? It goes to Wednesday, and council will just, I will let you know now that by the time we leave this evening, we'll end up doing the audit of the mailroom and the telephone, so that's where they will fit in. We'll take Mel out of order tonight before we leave, okay? So that doesn't add more to the list because we got the public hearing. So that's where those two will go. Madam Clerk, the next item. Good evening, Mr. May.
Good evening, Mr. President. We've had a very busy year in the planning department. We anticipate another strong year in FY 2019, and we look forward to continuing working with the city as it develops and implements plans, and as we continue to look at our zoning ordinances.
Questions, councilors? Any questions for Mr. May? Councilor Cruz?
Actually, just one. I'm sure it's pretty simple, but the conservation agent is not under the Conservation Commission?
No, neither the Planning Board nor the Conservation Commission have staff of their own. They are staffed by the Planning Department. That way, unlike the Board of Health, who hires the director of the board, the Conservation Commission is staffed by the city department.
And you serve as her director?
I am the director, yes.
And
so she works for me, yes.
Assigned to whatever work, not the Conservation Commission?
Well, the commission does assign work also, especially enforcement activities, but she's officially paid by the department.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other questions for Mr. May, Council? Councilor, no, Councilor Nicastro.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. May. Thank you for coming.
Good evening, Councilor.
Happy belated birthday.
Thank you.
I personally admire your planning skills. I think you're really good at what you do. I would just like to gently but firmly say we need more economic development in our community. And this budget is a great reflection on all your planning talents and what you're doing, but we need more economic development in our community. And so can you at least address that briefly this evening as to your big plans for the coming year?
Yes, Councilor. We are negotiating a couple of different projects right now that we'll be bringing to City Council. I don't quite want to go on record as to saying what they are just yet, but we are coming up with a series of targeted marketing pieces and targeted incentive packages for specific industries and for specific districts in our community. We continue to work with the real estate community to try to attract investment in our community and the jobs that those bring. You know, you may remember, or you may know of, you know, last year we were able to bring in a large sushi processing facility. Kind of under the radar, but it's the largest sushi processing in New England. And it further expands our food hub. We have a lot of food businesses here. That's particularly good for us because it's a quality job at a good wage, and it also, food processing requires a lot of water use. So we benefit twice from that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Dericourt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To see you, Mr.
Good evening,
May.
sir.
Quick question. I mean, I know you've been at the job for the past probably about like over 3 years now?
4.
4 years, thank you. Can you give us an idea in terms of like how many business sort of like have been conducted under your administration?
I have not, I don't have a list that I can go through right now, but we have worked with several and small businesses that we've kept in the community. But I can get you a list of people who we've worked with when I get back to the office.
That would be great if you can email it to all of us.
Yes, sir.
That'd be interesting. Another question. I mean, I know that this probably was like 2016. There was a big thing about like changing, you know, downtown Brockton and Main Street and stuff like that. I know. I mean, obviously, you've been doing your best in terms of like the future. Do you have any sort of like idea in terms of like whether or not we're gonna have some new business downtown based on some of the stuff that you cannot release yet?
Well, we've had some significant investment in the community over the last few years. We've permitted a lot of projects that are now trying to secure their funding for development. We have a tough nut to crack in the commercial development end. There's a very strong housing demand, which is good for the community, but we need to be able to break that commercial nut also. And commercial not meaning just retail. Retail, we have to really get the mix right with the number of people who live and work downtown, and to make sure that we have the right mix of businesses on the first floor. But that, again, it takes time of having more people downtown, both living and working.
Thank you for sharing. I mean, based on your budget requests, I'm assuming that you do have a wonderful staff, so you believe by having this amount of money, it will allow you and your staff to do what you expect to do in the future. What I mean by this, from 2018 to 2019, and that money will allow you and your staff to continue doing the job you've been doing, right?
We will continue the work that we have, and we continue our partnerships with Brockton 21st Century and the Brockton Redevelopment Authority to try to bring more business into our community.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Councilor. Any other questions, Councilors? Councilor Fowle?
This is just information, so I'll know what I'm talking about. Building and grounds repairs, $10,440.
We have a line item for buildings and grounds. We do some of the maintenance that goes on, remodeling that goes on in our office. We installed new ceiling tiles last year and new office furniture. We also take care of, although Tim Carpenter does a lot of the works in the park that is City Hall Plaza, we also participate in some of those as building and grounds activities.
All right, and consultant, it is down a bit from last year. Would this be the line item from which you would pay Nova Armstrong?
No, sir. The Nova Armstrong is paid out of the Conservation Commission budget.
Okay, so consultants here for $66,000. Whom would you network with that funding?
For example, we're working with people like Kathy McCabe, who have done economic development work here in the city before. We sometimes contract with OCPC and other small consulting firms. The $66,000 is not a lot of money for doing major planning efforts. We've been blessed by being able to use our $40R dollars for that. We have currently been working in the 4th Ward, creating a framework plan for Campello and the Southern Main Street Corridor, which should be published shortly, as soon as I get the councilors' edits. I know we're busy. But all of those items usually come out of that line item.
Okay, but the subject areas would be what? Housing, economic development?
Economic
traffic?
development planning, zoning planning, housing studies.
All right, and again, this is just a small number. It says ComServe, community service, communication service?
Communication service.
Okay, phones and things like that.
Correct, sir.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. All set, Councilor? Yes. Any other questions, councilors? Seeing as none?
Have a good night, John.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Ladies.
Next item, Madam Clerk. But Captain Hallisey is not here, so we have Mr. Williamson. Captain Williamson's.
Captain Williamson standing in for Captain Halsey. He's out of state.
He's out of state. He's out of state. Well, he already approved that by me last week, so.
Chairman, to keep it uniform.
Pardon me?
To keep it uniform, do you know when he's coming back?
In a week, I believe. He's with his family.
I think he's coming back on Thursday.
His daughter's at school or something. Yeah, he called me when the calendar did hit, so I said yes, okay, so.
Yes, his daughter's going to be a freshman in college.
Exactly.
She has orientation
So,
today.
I think we can bend a little bit. Go ahead. Any presentation or any questions?
I'm a former traffic commissioner, so I do have the working knowledge of what's involved. It's a pretty basic budget. The majority of it is for line painting and signs, and that's all I have.
Councilor Cruz.
I'm actually glad to see some of these numbers different. This is my first year serving on the Traffic Commission, and I know that it's, I see last year's actual expenditures were, what, 126,000? We have 556 in the budget this year. There's been concern that some of that possibly the Traffic Commission needs to be revamped, which I don't happen to agree with. But what it does need to be is funded. Quite often, signs are voted on, passed, whatever it might be, traffic lines that need to be done, and there's nobody and no money to do them. Is most of this money transferred from another, has it been done this way in the past, or is the mayor adding approximately $500,000 to?
I would say that the money expended year to date is not, a lot of it's done in June, the line painting, and that's most of the expenses. So I would say that that number is about to go up by the end of the month.
That was 2017 actually was 126,000. The revised budget for 2018 is 621. But Jay, maybe you can answer this. That 621, has most of that been spent, or?
I would have to look at that. I would think probably increased during the year.
In that case, my question would be, is 556 enough? Because a big part of the Traffic Commission's job is setting up the city for enforcement. And it seems like the complaints that I'm hearing from some of the councilors and some of the public is that they don't get anything done. Well, the Traffic Commission is doing their job, but nothing can happen afterwards, it seems, in many cases, because there isn't enough money. There isn't even a person that works for the Traffic Commission that is actually charged with being in charge of putting signs up and...
Right. If I can go back a few years, when I was a traffic commissioner, when you get permission to put up a sign or approval, then the work order would go out to the DPW. And the DPW worker was assigned to go out periodically and put those signs up. It's my understanding that's been an issue with, I don't want to speak for the DPW, but
well, and it seems
maybe
like
they've been able to spare somebody.
That they can't really spare somebody, and technically they're almost doing it as a favor to the Traffic Commission, because it's not really assigned to the DPW. It's not really something in their job description. So I think we need to possibly look at putting assigning a person to the Traffic Commission to do those jobs, so that in a timely manner we can get those signs and paint. Painting's different, because I know you have to hire a company that does line painting and do it at certain times of the year when the weather is right. So I do know that there's a bunch that will be happening shortly, even though it seems like the middle of winter, it is the middle of June. So, but it seems like there's nobody who's actually charged with being in charge of that.
That's correct.
And you were a long time commissioner, chairman of the Traffic Commission. If you had your way, would there be somebody that was assigned to that?
If I had my way, yes, there would be. Like I said, when I was there, it was under Chief Gomes. For the period I was there, it was 2 or 3 years. Ernie Bethany was an employee. He was on it. I understand that's now an issue, and it's because they can't spare somebody.
Well, they're so shorthanded that it's really not in their job description.
Right.
It's been being done that way, but it doesn't seem to be the most prudent way to do it.
Right, you're making all this progress at your hearings and going out to the sites and determining that signs need to go up, and then
there's a backlog of trying to get it up. Right. So we may need to look at adding a person somehow with that job description. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Councilor Cruz, just for a point, and when Commissioner Rowley's here tomorrow evening, you can ask him, but I believe they have a person that is just one person that's appointed to do it, but it's just the one. What's that? No, I see him. He goes by the house quite a bit, so I see him in the course of the day.
Right.
And the truck's loaded.
He's doing it.
One person.
Right, but he's doing it, but it's not actually his full-time job.
He came out of the DPW and they appointed him. Yeah. At one time, it was Ernie used to do it a few years back.
Yeah, and it wasn't full-time when he did it.
It wasn't full-time either.
No.
Right.
Thank you.
Councilor Beauregard.
Thank you, sir, for being here this evening. Appreciate it.
Thank
And you break down things well, and I am kind of excited that you had a background in this. I'm going to ask here, and I suppose this might be going off a little bit. When someone gets into a car accident and smashes a, traffic light, does the city get reimbursed? Would this come back into your budget? I mean, who's being responsible for replacing it, for example?
The traffic lights, a lot of them come into the signal division, the fire department.
Well, I knew that part, but I was
Yeah.
so then this is a tri-budget. It's police, DPW, and fire department.
This isn't, actually, I'd say this is none of those. It's just the traffic commission. It's not police. There's no salaries in here.
Oh, no, I
It's
realize
just for
that, yes.
basically, mostly line painting and signs.
Okay.
Mostly.
Mostly, no, but
Yeah.
because I wanted to ask for this traffic light situation, and,
There is a line item for guardrails.
yes.
Some of the guardrails get hit. If there's an insurance company involved, then it's handled that way, but sometimes these are hit and runs where we don't have an insurance company to come in and take care of it. So that's what that line item's for.
Thank you. Have you seen any, how would I say, or do you have any suggestions for changes that could help facilitate this more? Because, again, like myself, I've heard many people complain about the lines in the city being behind. I realize it doesn't directly fall under you, but one of the things we found out, too, with traffic is it seems that there's always a discussion. Earlier, we talked about, what do I want to call it, traffic stops and different. So this seems to fall under this, or the situation with parking during the winter. That always seems to be a dilemma, too. People, there's no supposed to be parking in a blizzard or what have you, and yet there's cars on the streets, and people, get the car towed if all goes as planned, and they get a ticket, too. I'm under the impression, though, that you do not get all the benefits from a parking ticket. Is that correct?
No, we don't get it directly back. I believe it goes into the general fund. I'm not sure, but it doesn't come back into our budget.
Okay. All right, thank you very much.
Any type of citation, that's...
Okay, thank you.
Any other question, councilors? Councilor Azak?
Good evening, Captain. Thank you for being here tonight. I served many years, I believe 3 on the Traffic Commission, and it is nice to finally see a line item for the guardrails, so that's something that's been added, I believe, this year. It's more of a comment than a question, but I would really like to go on the record stating that I hope we're not using the same company that is lining our streets, because before Captain DeBarry retired, I believe it was, he was supposed to put it on the record to make sure the issues we had with the company last year, they took us right into the winter without our streets being painted. So I would have, just if you could look into that, or make a record somewhere.
I could look into it. I believe we're using, is it highway safety? I don't know if that's...
So that
who
is
we
a
said it-
different company, I believe, Mary, than last? It's the same one. Oh, that was one of the agreements with Captain DeBarry before he left. We had some major issues with them not... I'm sorry?
Could you have
Mayor,
Mr. step to the floor?
Yeah, Mayor, you want to come up front because we can't hear
They're currently
you.
under contract. It goes
From
out to
last
bid,
year?
and they were awarded the contract, so it would be an issue.
When
next
did their
time
contract come back up?
Was it renewed for July?
So it,
Sounds- And I know from when I was on there that we didn't get a lot of offers, a lot of vendors bidding. I don't know about this past year.
this
But there
past
one
year
year
was
we only had
horrendous.
one vendor
I
that bid on
just-
it.
Okay.
So we weren't
the only
really in
ones
a
that bid.
position to leverage a lot there.
It's just a little disappointing because I remember all the, just having a hard time with our streets were, I mean, you couldn't see any of the lines on our streets, no crosswalks, none of that. And I know that goes out to bid, but the agreement with Captain DeBarry before he retired, that he would at least let
Right.
our procurement officer put a note in there, what issues we have with certain companies. So when
I
it
do
comes
know
back
that the
up-
paint doesn't last as long as it did years ago. Something to do with environmentally safe paint that just doesn't last as long. I don't want to
Well-
get scientific here, but
The problem was they weren't painting them. They took us right into the winter. Like, there was a problem with with the time. And I know this company has different contracts in the city that I believe other departments didn't have a problem with it, but we did have a problem with the stripes. So if somebody can just be on top of that and make sure we don't have that issue with them, since they did get the contract.
We're going to put Councilor Cruz and Councilor Monahan on top of that. That's why
There you
they're
go,
sitting there,
councilors.
correct?
Thank
They'll figure it all, they'll figure it out for us. Okay, thank you, Councilor. Councilor Derrencourt?
Question, I mean, I might be a little bit off, Mr. Chairman, I do apologize. So, because you are here, I'm going to ask this question anyway. Sometimes I see people post like signs on electric poles, say like, we buy ugly houses. As we speak, I think I have one in front of my house. Is there, you guys probably haven't ever done it, is there a fee that if you catch somebody doing this that you demand that they pay for something?
They're posting signs.
They go on telephone poles, they just...
Point of for Councilor Cruz.
Department is up, that's who enforces that, and those are illegal to do.
Thank you,
But
Councilor.
you'll want to talk to the building commissioner when he comes up.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Any other questions? Seeing as none, thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it very much. Next item, Madam Clerk.
Veteran Services, David A. Carroll, Director.
Good evening.
Good evening, Mr.
Chairman.
Farrell. How are you?
Very good, sir.
Good. Any comment?
No, I submit a budget that has a slight decrease due to the decreasing need for veterans' cash benefits. That trend, I think, is going to continue.
Very good. Any questions for Mr. Farrell? Councilor Beauregard.
I didn't hear what he said. Could you? Yeah.
No, I submitted a budget, again, that shows the trend of decreasing need for cash benefits for veterans in need.
Really?
I think the veteran population is gradually declining, and the need for the cash benefits has been declining at about the same rate. I think it's 8% this year, somewhere in that order. And it has for the last several years. So I think it topped at about 950,000 3 years ago. And we're asking for 775 this year.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Cruz.
Yeah, just for the public, can you explain those cash benefits and where the money comes from?
Certainly. The cash benefits are provided by the city of Brockton directly. They assist veterans who are living below 100% of the federal poverty level, as well as reimburse veterans and surviving spouses for medical costs, out-of-pocket medical costs, who are living below 200% of the federal poverty level. Roughly that's under $13,000, 100%, and $19,000 for 200%. I know the math doesn't add up there, but it's the way they calculate it. A year later, the state reimburses that benefit back to the city at 75%. So 75% of every dollar is reimbursed by the state of Massachusetts Department of Veteran Services. So the city of Brockton is funding 25% of that cost on a continual basis. Fortunately, over the last 3 or 4 years, because we're in a decreasing expense mode, we're getting more money back now, so we're probably at about 20% if you look at the outflow versus the inflow. So, and I think the state has estimated that there'll be under 100,000 veterans in the state of Massachusetts by 2030. Right now, I think it's about 300,000.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilor. Any other questions? Seeing none? Thank you on that item, Mr. Farrell. Next one.
Thank you. This money I'm requesting, or the Veterans Council is requesting, covers the cost of the 2 parades. There's a slight increase request this year, hoping to attract some additional musical groups to our parade and ceremony. That said, we've got a couple of other ideas also going forward to, highlight the need to recognize our active duty service members, particularly those who committed to the armed forces out of the Brockton high schools, and that would include the regional high school and Cardinal Spellman.
Councilor Beauregard.
Mr. President, again, I'm sorry.
That's correct.
But on Memorial Day, there was this rumor going around that the Veterans Parade would be canceled. Is that correct, or it's still a rumor?
No, what you probably heard was the plan to have the final ceremony that we normally have on Veterans Day indoors. So I view it as more favorable, given the really generally cold weather and windy weather this past Veterans Day. And I defied the recommendation of the mayor and his assistant to move it inside. I thought the young people could stand outside for a few minutes, but it actually ran quite a bit longer than I planned, and it was cold, and it's just not fair to the kids who, in the band and the JROTC to stand out there for 30 minutes at attention, or even sitting in that cold granite. So we're going to move the conclusion of the parade indoors in this building. We have yet to determine the route, whether the parade will just start at the Veterans of All Wars Monument and come down here, or just go around the block here. So that's to be determined. There will be a parade, but the end of it will be here at the War Memorial.
Oh, thank you very much. Appreciate
Thank you. Councilor Ellie, did you want to, set?
The mayor the same thing, and he expressed that they were just going to change the route to wind up here.
Very good. No other questions? Councilor Sullivan? Yeah.
David, again, thank you. Kudos to you and your staff. The parade the other day was excellent. It really was, and every year it is, so thank you for what you do on that. I know it's a lot of work and a lot of input to get it to fruition that day, so thank you. And I also want to thank you, as you may recall, and some of the councilors weren't on the council, but a few years ago I did the resolve relative to maintenance of the veterans monuments throughout the city of Brockton. And you took it upon yourself, and you really did an analysis, and you replaced a lot of the signs, and I just want to thank you, because when you drive around the city of Brockton, you see a lot of these appropriate monuments for people that gave the ultimate sacrifice. So I want to thank you for that, and I do also want to say that, Larry Rowley, to his credit, when I drive by one that has a little high grass, I call and they cut it like within 24 hours. So again, thank you for what you're doing every day for the veterans, David. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor.
Thank you, Councilor.
He's quite right. I have a lot of support that really assists when I pick up the phone and ask another department to take care of something. They really snap to. We're very lucky in this city. I'm very lucky.
You do a good job, Dave. Thank you. Anything else? Seeing as none, all set. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Barry.
Madam Clerk.
Good evening, Mr. President, councilors.
Good evening. How are you?
I'm doing well.
Anything you'd like to say before you?
I don't have an opening statement, but I would like to touch on a couple of points I'd just like the council to consider.
Go right ahead.
91.5% of the animal control budget is personnel related. Animal control is a 24/7 operation. We currently have 8 positions in the department. The staff performs multiple other functions in addition to calls for service, such as clerical functions, and I brought this up recently when I was before the council. We have no clerical staff in our department. We also attend court hearings as part of our duties. We care for animals, so we don't just maintain an office where we field calls for service. We actually bring animals back to our facility. We care for those animals. That requires a great deal of work. We maintain the kennels. We do have a full-time kennel worker. However, when the kennel worker is not there, we do have animal control officers that step in and take care of caring for them, as well as maintaining the grounds to the facility. So I just wanted to bring those items up. And with that being said, if you have any questions for me,
Council Fowle.
I just want to start off with a personal observation. I felt pretty good tonight, no aches and pains. Thought I was feeling like a youngster, and then I see where you have been with us 30 years and 3 months. I mean, I remember when you came on board.
19 years old.
I was at 19 years old. I was at 7 Commercial Street, and I just went downhill fast. So
he still looks like a young puppy too, right?
Yeah.
No pun intended.
As you know, because you and I often talk and I'm roaming around and I find a stray animal, are we able to place, does this budget give you enough money to, A, get them to a veterinarian if you find a stray or an animal is hurt, and B, do we have to euthanize a lot of them, or what?
I'll answer the second part first. Thankfully, the euthanasia rate is very low. I can't give you an exact number, but I can give you a comparison. When I started for animal control in 1995, it wasn't uncommon for 10, 12 animals every week to be euthanized. Now we're probably around maybe 2 a month. You know, it's a dramatic change for the better. As far as the medical costs go, the last couple of years have been very difficult. We've actually gone over, the allocated amount. Thankfully, we work with a veterinarian who really gives us a break, a lot of times up to 50% off. We also have a grant, the MVMA grant, which we get up to $2,000 a year to offset those costs for adoptable animals. So it's been difficult, but we've been able to still accomplish it. But the same with people, health insurance, animals is the same way. That's why they have pet insurance now. I'm sure a lot of you have heard it, anyone that has an animal. But probably in the next year or so, you'll probably see me ask for an increase in the veterinarian services line item.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Azak.
Councilor?
Quick question. How long has it been, we no longer have a euthanization room or station, correct?
We bring animals to either the veterinarian, a couple different veterinarians, or the Animal Protection Center here in Brockton do the euthanasia for us.
We used to have a...
Yes, we used to do it on site. We no longer do.
How long ago has it been since we stopped doing it?
Probably 8 years, I think.
Oh, okay. Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
probably about 8 years.
So I'm, with the numbers down, figuring that's probably, it's a lot cheaper for us not to have our own site to, so is it cheaper to take them to the vet?
It's really not bad now. I mean, at the Animal Protection Center, it's, for a cat, it's $25, I believe, and for a dog, it's $80. And the veterinarian's a little bit cheaper on that.
Are we using local vets in Brockton, or are we going outside of the city?
We use Lloyd's Animal Hospital over in Stoughton.
In Stoughton?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you,
Mr.
Council.
Chairman.
Anyone else? Seeing as none, you're all set.
All right. Thank you, councilors. Have a good evening.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Madam Clerk?
Good evening, councilors.
Good evening, Mr. Tataglia. How are you?
Fine, thank you.
Good. Anything you want to say, or you just want to take questions?
Yeah, basically the only real change to this budget from last year, I'm asking for a full-time animal inspector rather than a part-time that we have now.
Okay.
The job just cannot be handled 18 or 19 hours a week.
Yep. Okay. So that's what's in there for your request, is in the budget there?
It's in the budget, yes.
Council Beauregard, you have a question?
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, sir, for being here this evening. I know you
Council.
people work really hard, and wondering about how our chicken registration is doing.
Good.
Good? Good. Okay. Do you think if this keeps up, we'll be able to pay for how would I say it, the increase in a full-timer for the animals?
Not with the fees that we're charging them, it's $30 for 3 years.
Oh, I understand. I was.
I think you were at that meeting. when-
Yes, I was. No, I was kidding.
We were lucky to get $30
But we had to do
every
some.
3 years.
You had to do some bargaining, but no, I'm fully in support of you having a full-timer, because we still have our individuals that insist on doing as they please. I know
Yes.
you get reports about roosters all the time, unfortunately, yes.
Yeah. And this new regulation that we put in is probably going to take at least a third of her time.
Yeah, that I believe. Thank you, Mr. Tartaglia.
Anything else, councilors? Any other questions for Mr. Tartaglia? Seeing as none. Councilor Rodriguez?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome.
Mr. Tartaglia, how are you doing?
Good, how are you, Councilor?
You did say that the animal inspector is going to become a full-time position from a part-time position, so is the person who is currently in the job going to go to full-time? Or are you...
That's a possibility. I think we have to post it in my office first.
You're going to post that out?
In my office.
But you have somebody that's already working part-time?
Yes, so he probably will be the full-time inspector.
Okay. And you do have a vacant ordinance enforcement officer?
Yeah, code enforcement officer, yes.
Are you currently...
Right now, I have applications in my office that I'm reviewing for that position.
So you've started that process already?
Yes.
Okay. And what exactly is that person going to be doing?
Code enforcement? Everything on outsides of properties.
Outside what?
Of properties.
Okay. And...
in other words, junk cars, grass cutting, any complaint that we see on See-Click Fix, we take care of a lot of them. Most of them are outside. As I said, junk car, nuisance complaint, which is the one we use the most, because that's all encumbering.
Now, does your department have the ability to assess severe fines, or you basically go by to whatever we have in the books for fine assessments?
Well, whatever we have in the books.
But do you have any flexibility in terms of dealing with that? Or you just strictly go by?
We give them more, we could give them more tickets. Instead, once every 2 days, you can give it every day. As long as that, once you give them the 5 days, let's say, on a nuisance complaint. If that isn't cleaned up or isn't taken care of, whatever it is, we can start fining.
Okay.
Every day that exists. And I believe that it starts at $50 and it can go up to $300. And that's the same with the certificate of fitness ordinance. Our problem is having the courts hear these. However, the law, Massachusetts general law that the mayor was talking about, 40U, it will be taken away from the courts, and we'll have our own in-house lawyer who will be the hearing officer.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, I hope that you'd give me just a little leeway, because I got to ask the executive director of the Board of Health a question that has nothing to do with the budget, but it has something to do within his department. If you
Yeah, I'll allow the leeway.
Several months ago, we started that whole process of adding fluoride to the drinking water in Brockton.
Yep.
And we actually had the Department of Public Health providing funding for us to go through this process.
No.
The Department of Public Health?
Department of Public Health has not given us anything.
Didn't they promise this?
What we're doing is, through One Smile Brockton.
Right.
Okay. We're going to the DentaQuest Foundation. We are still working on it. At the present time, we'll be sending a letter to DentaQuest, sitting down with them, asking them for $80,000 just to get a specification out, drawings, etc., so it can go out for bids, and then we'll know what this is going to cost. DentaQuest may give us more money. I mean, I've had People say 80,000. I've had experts say 400 to 800,000, the cost of this.
Because as you know, I was involved with you in that process.
Yeah,
while
I'm still working with Maria.
And I actually thought we were at the finish line when it came
Not
to
even
adding.
close. Not even close.
Yeah, once, again, we forget that we're working with some state off, because DPH supposedly was going to provide us with chemicals for a year or so, and then we were going to
Well, that's
be able
supposed to
do
come,
that.
that's supposed to come with this DentaQuest company.
Okay. But you still have hopes that this is going to go forward?
Unless they back off, depending on how much it's going to cost.
Okay.
Like I said, we've had not quotes, but estimates from different people who are in the business that sell the equipment. You know, they're talking about, like I said, 80,000 to 800,000. It's a range.
Well, I hope that it does come to fruition, because...
Well, I do too. I mean, this has been since 1972, when the previous Board of Health voted for it.
Maybe once I hit the nursing home, I think it'll become a reality. Thank you, Mr. Tartaglia. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome, Councilor.
Or we can come before the council and demand that the council fund this. This is a Board of Health mandate.
Thank you. Any other questions, councilors? Go ahead, Councilor Cruz.
To appropriate that first, we can't, so.
Well, if both of you are in court, then both of you...
It has to start with the mayor's office, that's all I'm saying.
That's all right. It might.
We can't start it on our own, just like the public to know that at home, that we can't start that process. It has to come out of the mayor's office.
We can start. The Board of Health would start it.
Right.
No, but the appropriation, I think Jay will back me up, has to come from the mayor's office to us. It can't come, even a judge can't bring it to us first. So, we'd have to fund it, but
I know.
it has to come. I just want the public at home to know that under no circumstances
That's not you, right?
can we start it. We do not have the legal ability to start that process.
No, the Board
Okay.
of Health started.
Thank you.
Councilor Nacastro has a question, Mr. Tartaglia.
Mr. Chairman, good evening, Mr. Tartaglia.
Good evening.
I just really wanted to say thank you. I've been calling your office pretty regularly since the beginning of the year when I was sworn in, and everyone, your inspectors have been very responsive. I called as recently as today. I get return phone calls telling me what happened and why, and I'm very appreciative of that, so I can go back to my constituents. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Any other questions for Mr. Tartaglia? Seeing as none, thank you, Mr. Tartaglia. Appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you for being here. Madam Clerk. Good evening, Mr. O'Donnell.
Good evening, councilors.
Anything, any presentation, or anything you want to say before any
Basically,
questions?
the budget's pretty straightforward. We've reduced our purchases of services and goods by 25%, and we're seeking to change a part-time assessor's job to full-time.
Questions, councilors? Councilor Rodriguez.
Good evening, how are you?
Good evening. Good.
You have in here, I believe, in the first block of the items, in the sense, there's $20,000 for separation cost?
Yes.
Who is leaving?
She decided not to leave, so Gail Gleason's retiring, but she decided to delay it for a year. So Jay was gonna, Gail Gleason? Yeah, she's not gonna leave.
So that...
Jay was gonna recommend for you guys to take it out, yes.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Council. Council Darren Court.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good to see you. You said you would like to change a part-time position to a full-time?
Yes.
Can you tell us why?
It was always a full-time position.
Okay.
In 2008, Mayor Harrington reduced it to part-time, and we need a full-time person. It took 2 years to fill that part-time position then. They went without a third member. We need, I'll go back, we need 3 members on the board, required by the Department of Revenue. So we can't go a long period of time without 3 members. It'll be difficult to find another person like Mr. Harrington, who just retired. and we can't put an inexperienced person in that position.
Thank you. So you said like it used to be a full-time position?
It was always a full-time position.
And the former mayor?
Former Mayor Harrington reduced it to part-time.
Do you know why that decision was made?
Budget constraints. I wasn't here then.
Money?
Council, it was a year during which there were layoffs, and then there was a death in the department that wasn't filled, and so the position was just left unfilled for a period of time.
2 years.
2 years. And then when we finally restored it, it was at a part-time level, and we did have a hard time filling it.
So it's kind of like...
We were getting arguments from the Department of Revenue that we weren't adequately staffed.
Okay, so you said like it... So is it like, was it hard to find somebody to do this job part-time, or was it just like, it's not sort of like good for your, for your administration to actually have somebody doing this kind of job as a part-time person?
They were just fortunate to find Mr. Harrington, who took the position. He had just retired from Randolph, and he had over 25 years, and he was looking to still continue to work, and he committed to a couple of years, and he stayed 7.5, so the city was very fortunate to have him.
Okay.
But I can't see us finding another part-time person like him.
So in order for you to do the job effectively, it would mean that that position should be full-time. So this is your...
I feel that, yes.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Castro?
Good evening, Mr. O'Donnell. Thank you for coming to us. Have you tried to find someone part-time, or you're waiting until after this procedure, after July 1?
Exactly. It's an appointment of the mayor, so...
Okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Sullivan?
Chairman.
Yes.
I don't have any questions. I just want to publicly take the time to thank Bob Harrington. As John just said, he used to work in Randolph, and I worked with him for many years over there. He's a good man. He did a great job. He's sorely missed, but his retirement is well-earned. So on behalf of the City Council, and I know you speak to him, John,
yes,
I want to thank Bob for what he did for the City of Brockton, and I hope he enjoys his retirement.
I will tell him.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilor. Any other questions? Seeing as none, you're all set. Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Next item, Madam Clerk. Good evening, Mr. Treasurer. How are you? How are you?
Very good, thanks.
Any comment, or you just want to...
I'd personally like to take the opportunity to thank my staff. As you know, in the collector's office, there's approximately 300,000 bills that go out, and the phone starts ringing anytime a bill hits the street. Lines can be out the door. The excise bill, it can be almost going out the doors. So I personally like to thank all of my staff. Every dollar of this budget goes through one of my 2 offices.
Very good. Councilors, any questions? Any questions of the Treasurer? Councilor Castro.
Good evening, Mr. Brophy. Thanks for coming. Probably everyone knows this, but I don't. What is the SEC Trust Fund Commission?
Oh, that's the Trust Fund Commission. The city has trusts that were bequeathed to the city. And what we do is interest comes in every month, and a clerk gets a stipend to actually book that as a receipt and maintain due minutes of meetings and stuff like that.
So you have meetings of this commission?
The trust fund, the commission right now is unfilled, but it...
You're meeting yourself? No, I'm teasing.
I'm not part of the committee. But many of these, there's wills tied to a lot of this trust funds. The money is spent specifically based on the wills. So it's not, it's a commission that needs to be staffed, but it actually, there's not a lot of determination in how the money is spent.
Thank you.
All set, Councilor? Councilor Beauregard?
Thank you. So am I to assume like the DW Field Park?
That is not part of the city's trust
That
fund.
would not be a
No.
trust, though, from them?
No.
Okay.
No, we are a beneficiary of the DW Field Trust. That's all.
Okay.
We receive money, but we don't actually have the money to invest.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Cruz?
Thank you. Thank you for being here, Mr. Brophy. It's a zero line item, but I'm interested why this is in here, and because it may come up Wednesday night. Treasurer's school choice and charter school. What is that in your line item? And it's zero funded, so...
It's been zero funded for the 16 years that I've been here.
Maybe, Jay, because it is something I know we're going to be asking about Wednesday night, so...
Yeah, years ago, it was appropriated for the cost, and now it's just taken directly off the cherry sheet.
So the state now just takes it on their own, doesn't have to come through the city?
And that's just an accounting code that's existed and it hasn't been removed from the system.
So it used to actually be funded, if somebody did school choice, then we sent the money to them?
Yeah, I think it was funded through this account. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, because again, it will come up Wednesday night, I know, so, thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Any other questions on that particular one? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, next one. Mr. Brophy?
I'll take any questions on this.
Any questions? Counselor Cruz?
So basically, and again, this is a little bit for the public at home to hear, we have a limit that we can borrow at any given time, correct?
Correct.
Percentage-wise, around where do we usually stand? I see the numbers here, and, you know, if the public were to look at this, there's 20 or 30 different bonds outstanding right now.
Correct.
About where are we percentage-wise on what we could borrow?
There's a 5% based on the equalized valuation that the state sets. It's hundreds of millions of dollars. The different types of borrowings can be considered inside the debt limit or outside the debt limit. Building a school would be considered outside the debt limit. So you have to, it's a long complication. We have hundreds of millions of dollars worth of borrowing capacity.
So some of these that are listed are school construction loans, that kind of thing?
If you notice in the description, there's an O or an I.
Yep.
When it's outside the debt limit, it doesn't hit that 5% borrowing that we're allowed. If it has an I, it would do that.
What if it's an ISQ?
That's actually a state qualified bond.
Oh, okay.
In which the state actually, we get a better rate because the state will kind
State's backing the bond, basically.
They'll guarantee the payment.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilor.
Councilor, just on that, we're selling bonds this week, I think. This week. So we'll know there's money in here for interest. We'll know the interest cost by the time we get back to you. But in addition to that, we have to put out an offering document for that. And that information you're seeking is in that offering document, so we can get it for you. The exact amount.
Just a question then, so we're putting out some bonds. How is our rating right now?
We will find out this week. I just gave a presentation last week. I don't think we'll have anything negative, but perhaps tomorrow we'll get a positive outlook. If you recall, a few years ago we went to negative. They restored us to neutral, and I'm hoping maybe they'll give us a positive, but I can't promise that.
Okay. Thank you. Well, if you gave them that letter you gave us a couple weeks ago, it's probably negative.
Any other questions for Mr. Brophy?
I do have one.
Councilor Sullivan.
Good evening, Mr. Brophy.
Good evening.
Marty, on page 2 of 2 for the debt, it says voting machines. It has potential new issues for fiscal year 19, and voting machines, I think it says 165 grand. I can't read it. 185. What is that?
This is stuff we've actually had the authorizations. We've done temporary borrowings. This is some of the stuff this week we're going to be permanently borrowing.
Okay.
So what I did was try to get a schedule from our financial advisors as to what a payment would be for the fiscal year.
So those are projections then?
Yep.
Okay, all right.
We added it into the budget rather than coming back afterwards.
Yep, will make sense. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilor. Anything else for Mr. Brophy? Seeing as none, we're all set. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Madam Clerk. Ms. Cruz, good evening. You're smiling because this is the last one. I can see it. You've been grinning there all night long. Even though you're last, it doesn't matter. It's fine.
I've always been last on the budget hearings. Mel's going to step in and be last tonight, but I've usually been last. But that's okay.
There you go. But, well, and anyhow.
Last but not forgotten.
Before we even forget, thank you for your many, many years of service. Appreciate it very much. Now, that being said,
I'm going to try to do this. I do have a little bit of an opening statement.
go right ahead.
As you're aware, this is my last budget presentation due to my upcoming retirement. I want to thank my current staff and previous staffs, because no department head functions without a staff. I want to thank all administrations and counselors that I've worked with over my career. Most importantly, I want to thank my parents for raising me with the work ethic that made me the person and worker that I am today. My sisters, my brothers, in-laws, nieces and nephews, cousins, and friends for their love and support in my career, especially over the last year and a half. It's been a difficult one. With respect to the budget in front of you, the full-time salary request was increased after my submission as the Collins Center report was finalized. They have recommended a new position in the personnel department. That report, as you're well aware, came in after submissions. You just received that Collins report a couple of weeks ago. So there is the full-time line item has been increased to reflect that budget recommendation. There's an additional request that was not included in my budget. It's for consultant monies. There are key management retirements expected during the upcoming fiscal year, and the city will be using these funds to assist in the search for filling of these management positions. I'll take any questions that you might have.
Councilor Fowle.
Actually, just a moment of personal privilege. When I walked into the mayor's office in January 1992, you were the personnel coordinator. That's all we could afford. That's all we had. And I didn't know you, and you really didn't know me, and I can't thank you enough for all you did for me when I was in the mayor's office. You know, when you're in government, we make friends, we make enemies. That's just the nature of the game. But I have not forgotten, going back to 1992, that you took what we needed done, you helped me get it done, you brought us along, because there is a learning curve for a mayor, even if you've been 10 years on the school committee. So I would personally like to thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
The other thing that I wanted to ask you, and I realize it was an information request, and I do understand why I can't get the report on the potential reclassification of clerical staff. Just tell me financial implications. Quite a bit, not much, or I know you're in negotiations.
We're in negotiations, so we can't really say too much, but it's not as expensive as the city might have anticipated.
Okay.
We are within market.
No, it's not going to be a cardiac arrest when the report comes out, so.
If I might, Counselor, because it goes directly to that question. If there is we are under no obligation in that study to fund any of the recommendations. That was a condition of the study itself. But if there is a funding request, and I think there probably will be, for us to be fair to the people that are involved, we'll be coming before you. It's not in the budget. So
yes.
We'll be coming before you for a supplemental appropriation request. So the council will be fully involved in making the final decision on whether we do or don't fund it and the timing of it. I just wanted to make sure you understood that. And I don't think it'll be very long, but it could be over the course of the summer before we're finished. And if I might just own one thing about the personnel director's retirement.
Go ahead.
There's probably no other officer in the city that I've worked with as long as her, and there's nobody that has my respect more than Maureen Cruz. I worked late many, many nights. I never left the building where her car was gone. Never. She always there later than me. So we're missing, we're going to be missing somebody who is really terrific.
Exactly.
I just wanted to say that.
Thank you, Mr. Condon.
Hopefully she'll make up for that after.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you,
Condon. I
Mr.
appreciate
Chairman.
that.
Councilor Derencourt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. May I have a moment of personal privilege, please? Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Obviously, where do I start? As I was looking at how many years you've been serving in Brockton, it's been 40 years.
It will be 40 years when I walk out the door.
And
That's
I can
correct.
tell you that. And I can.
I should say when I'm running out the door.
It will be 40 years. And
Yes.
as I'm looking at that number, and I'm like, wow, 40 years ago I wasn't even born. And it's been 10 days since I turned 28, and I could not be more happy to actually, having some time to chat with you, especially right after my election when I went to City Hall and asked a couple of questions regarding some of the stuff that you are doing. I would personally thank you for everything you've been doing for the people in Brockton, and of course, I wish you nothing more than the best. And you've been an asset to the city of Brockton, and obviously you said the last 1 year and a half has been tough, but everybody has a tough moment. But you've been so great in terms of like handling it and no issue at all. So you have my respect, not just from now on, but till the end. So I wish you nothing but the best, but make the best out of it. So you put 40 years in the city, and I wish you another 50 years. Best of luck.
Thank you, Councilor, I appreciate that.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Monahan.
Oh, he's been quiet all night.
Thank God.
I know, I've been waiting for this
now.
moment. And normally, I would just say, I've known the Cruzes for practically all my life, and Maureen is, usually I'm just harassing her, but I had to say something nice, that it's my 5th term. She's always been professional and dignified in her job, did a great job all these years, no matter what anybody said out there in the public. Anyway, she's done a great job, and you made your family and the city of Brockton proud, so thanks for the job you've done all these years.
Thank you, Councilor.
And I always enjoy going up to your offices and harassing you and having a few laughs. But she's always there for anybody to come in if they have any questions, and she would take you in that office and take care of it. So thank you. Thanks again, Maureen.
Thank you, Councilor.
Any other questions or any other comments? Maureen, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Councilors.
Thank you. Enjoy golfing.
I will.
And don't leave Ward 3. Don't leave Ward 3.
Not yet.
Okay, thanks.
Not yet. Thank you, Councilors.
Councilors, since, as I indicated, I want to do the auditor, and we might as well while we have a few minutes, and that takes those out of line for Wednesday, and then we'll add those other two, we'll add Mr. Zaff and Mr. Wheeler to replace that. So, good evening, Mel. How are you?
Good.
Good.
Thank you.
We have the auditors right in front of us. Any comment? Anything you'd like to say?
I just want to say thank you to my staff. Just like Maureen was saying, it's so important to have a wonderful staff behind you, with you, and I just really appreciate everyone. So I want to say thank you.
Anyone have any questions in regards to the auditor's office? No, keep going. I think you're doing a fine job. And as I served with you just last couple of years as the chairman of the accounts committee, I think we came a long way in just that time. What we've wanted to do in regards to that. So I appreciate what you've done. Keep on going. Nothing else there, Madam Clerk. The next one. Mailroom, any questions about mailroom? Councilor Cruz.
When you put the budget books together, you and Jay, can you use darker tabs next time?
It's hard to read, huh?
These are
Okay.
impossible to read. I'm old, you know.
I'm glad you said it. I'm a little bit older than you, and I'm having a hard time.
I don't know why I picked that department to say it under, but I know you and Jay put the books together, you had 2 departments, and yeah, most of these soft tabs, I can't read anything. So, thank you.
Gotcha, you're welcome.
Anything else in regards to the mailroom? Seeing as none, next one, Madam Clerk. Keep calling.
Keep calling.
Any other questions in regards to, or any question in regards to the telephone? Seeing as none, next one, Madam Clerk. Anything in regards to that particular one? Councilor Fowler. You're getting one, so
We
it should
have
be
one
coming.
left, yeah. That's it, yep.
Seeing none? That's it? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
What, someone ask a question? For sure, none of us will be here, so forget it. Anything else? All right, councilors. Councilors, we'll be here again tomorrow night at 6:30, and we'll continue on. Thank you all for coming. Meeting adjourned.